Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. Of course, I am your host, DBJ, and we're taking another sneak peek at the upcoming Level Up Advanced 5th Edition rule set brought to you from a Kickstarter from N World. In full disclosure, I am a contributor and writer to this project, a small individual amongst many brilliant people on this project that I'm so happy to be a part of it. But this time we're going to take a look at the a monster stat block in the monstrous menagerie. And bear with me, this is a little bit new for me, but I think it's something that you can really see here. And I just wanted to share this with you. Normally on the show, we go live and I interact with everyone, but this is just a really quick peek at something here and for you guys to see a little quite a number of details in a monstrous menagerie and the monsters themselves, and includes everything from the initial information and details about the monster, the conflict with the monster, and maybe even some information about the after effects of the monster, whether it's dispatched or it retreats or something. So right here we have the Wraith, and this has also been highlighted in a few articles over in N World, and this will also give you the information if you prefer to read a blog about it. But here we have the Wraith, and there's a two-page spread, and we have, of course, if you can see the cursor, we have the Wraith. It has some information about its vile transformation, a sire of specters, and its undead nature. And then we go on, each of the monsters has a bit of information that the game master, or what we're calling the narrator, can use when incorporating this monster. We have legends and lore, which gives some information. We have a wraith encounter, so we have a little bit of a possible encounter with the CR level, being able to range it up and down by your choice. We also have signs, behaviors, random, or you can just pick one that's appropriate to your setting or world or your encounter itself. Uh, uh, Intelligent creatures, sentient creatures sometimes have names, so we even have some example names to use really very quickly, just especially if you want this monster to become more narrative focused, or maybe the monster ends up becoming like another NPC, even if they are adversarial. And then, of course, we have the stat block itself. But let's get into specifics here. So let's zoom in quite a bit. All right. So under the information, I would say some call it the fluff. This is the setting information about the vile transformation, and it gives you a little bit of each monster will have some detail about it. It might even be one line, like for example, in the owlbear example, it's like, oh, and in the winterlands, owlbears have like white feathers and fur. And that might spark something in your mind, like, ooh, if I move this monster from one environment to another, maybe there's a different interaction. But of course, this specific portion, the legends and lore portion, is great because many times players, when they're traveling through the wilderness of your world, they might want to know something about it, or you as the narrator might want to give out some information, or the players talk to locals. And of course, here with an arcana or religion check, characters can learn the following, and it gives you a range of DCs. And so, of course, the lower DCs, maybe it's public knowledge. Maybe the players don't even have to roll that with their passive ability, or frankly, they may have a campfire and they meet travelers along the road and they might learn this information. Whereas when you go to DC 15 and DC 20 checks for Arcana or Religion for this specific monster, so for example, in DC 20, it says race are resistant to mundane weapons unless they are silvered. They dislike bright light as well. And finding out that, these monsters are resistant to mundane weapons, instead of surprising your player characters in a random encounter, when they turn a corner, they might learn this information or know it themselves. So let's move on down, excuse me, to the built-in wraith encounters. And each monster, both with the lore portion of it and the encounter portion of it, will be specified to that monster. So, for example, it might, instead of saying arcana or religion check, it might be arcana or nature, or it might be survival or nature, based on the creature and how natural versus how arcane they are, or otherworldly, something of that nature. Now, under wraith encounters, they are, and as each monster is, you can see here CR 5 to 10, CR 11 to 16. Come on. And then CR 17 to 22. And of course, this is based on how many monsters there are, how many are in the group. But at a quick glance, for lower, or I would say tier 2 level encounters, possibly CR 5 to 10, you may look at and go, oh, okay, that's how many I want to use. Whereas if your characters are at a higher CR level, or you just want something very deadly, you can move on. So, for example, here at CR 11 to 16, you have yourself a Wraith Lord, or a Wraith with 3 or 4 whites, or a Wraith with 1d6 plus 4 ghouls or specters. And then there's even example treasure. And this is just a very, if this is literally random, or you're stuck for an idea for an encounter, it's a great way to just grab that very quickly. Oh, here's some example treasure. Of course, in your mind you can modify that on the fly, but you might need a starting point, and this is a great way to have a starting point. All right, now we move over here to signs and behaviors. And these are absolutely positively narrative elements. And signs, the signs portion of this, instead of psychologically, we sometimes, as players and game masters and narrators and such, when we hear of a random encounter, sometimes we think of that in a literal sense, like, oh, players are walking around the corner, they walk past a tree or a stone monolith, oh, there is monster. Not necessarily. It should be built into the setting. And so some signs like, oh, non-magical flames wink out, or there's a patrolling specter, or traveler's skin prickles with goosebumps, et cetera, et cetera. These signs may give signs to the players that there's something wrong and what kind of creature is around. And of course, over time, your players may learn these signs. When they feel these, or see or experience these signs yet again, they're going, oh man, remember 2 sessions ago with the Wraith? Remember 5 years ago when we fought them? I think they're around here, or there's a greater intensity of these signs. Also, there is a subtlety to this from Level Up uh, Advanced 5th Edition that incorporates the exploration pillar. And the subtlety that I'm referring to is the fact that there are environmental signs where there are no monsters at all. And so this can ramp up the tension, because maybe if, for example, the traveler's skin prickles with goosebumps, maybe it's just because it's cold out. Maybe it's not because there's a monster. And this might be an opportunity to ramp up the tension, as the players may not know what kind of monsters there are. Also, there's something else that is done in the monstrous menagerie, and that is some monsters have similar signs. So do they think it's a vampire, or ghosts, or wraiths, or warlocks or something? I don't know, but if they have similar signs, they might, the PCs, through preparation, might have a handful of ideas, but may not know specifically. Also, we have behavior, like, what is the monster doing? Instead of the monster just sitting there waiting for you to use your wireless controller to go around the corner into the room, what what was the monster doing in the first place? And so here we have various behaviors, like, for example, hunting for life to extinguish, or on a mission to kill a particular individual, which that brings up a greater story idea. Like, well, why were they hunting them? Were they ordered to hunt them? Are they hunting them because of past trauma before they died, or maybe they were left to die by the wraith and their family and friends ran away, or something like that. Maybe they're raising an undead army, or leading a raid, or maybe they're studying a map or an evil tome. And of course, this also means that whatever their behavior is, the players can interact with them in that kind of way. Like, maybe the wizard, seeing them studying a map or an evil tome, and the wizard of the party is like, we don't need to have a fight with this thing that drains life. Maybe we can just exchange information and move on. Again, as I said before, we have some example names: Winter Thane, the Mist King, Lord Nile, like nihilistic, Queen Sundralis, etc. And these are just examples, especially if the players, because come on, we all know that one player that's like, well, what's their name? And you're going, you're me, and you're braided up. I've been in that position many times. All right, so now we get into finally getting into the stat block itself. Now, here in the stat block, we at the very top we have it's a medium undead. It's got a challenge rating of 5. The XP, we've seen this before. But let's look at this one little spot right here. Bloodied. Every creature in the Monstrous Menagerie, I'm not going to say creature, every adversary has something called bloodied. And it is, for those who are familiar with 4th edition, there was the bloodied condition. And of course, bloodied tends to be when the monster is at half hit points. Now, the bloodied condition is like a narrative trigger for the narrator running the game. Now, there might be within the statistics of the creature an actual mechanical change. Um, Now, sometimes that change might be um, some kind of berserk rage reaching into some greater power. Sometimes it might be a fear element to it, but it's a trigger to change the monster's behavior based on the situation. And of course, because of that change, it's a narrative cue to the narrator to go, oh yeah, maybe this monster doesn't want to stay and fight to the death, or maybe this monster wants to protect its young, or it is on a mission by a greater being and knows that, you know what, it's better to run and get reinforcements than to stay and fight. And so yes, there might be a mechanical condition to the bloody, and it's also a story element. Like, why would the monster stay around? Maybe it's going to beg for its life, or target one of the downed PCs and drag them away to eat later, or something like that. So each monster has the bloodied, air quotes, um, circumstance. And of course, in the game, bloodied isn't a condition. Player characters don't suffer the bloodied condition. This is only for monsters. This is all game master, dungeon master, narrator facing. And it's just a way to go, oh, you know what? When they get down to, oh, bloodied at 33, oh, there's 33 hit points. This monster's not going to stick around. They're going to run away and maybe fight another day, or watch from the sidelines, or lick their wounds or something like that. All right, so we have all of the traditional stat blocks, but right here in the stat block, you're going to see proficiency and maneuver DC. Now, the proficiency is very common. If you play 5th edition, you understand what the proficiency bonus is. Based on we can refer to that when, if for some strange reason you're making other skill checks for the monster, or making challenge checks, maybe like uh, charisma versus charisma, or strength versus strength, or something like that, or making some other skill attempts rather than, well, you do have your skills, you do have your regular statistics, and then you can add in the proficiency bonus based on what you think for the situation. But right next to it is something called maneuver DC. I don't want to make too much of a comparison to this because this is an editorial sneak peek. But if you've ever played or know about Pathfinder, Pathfinder had this, like, what's the name of it? It's like a combat modifier. Well, in ours, we have something known as a maneuver DC, because there are there's an expanded list of basic maneuvers every creature, PC and adversary, can do. And those maneuvers might be like knocking someone down, or disarming them, or pinning them down, or something of that nature. And this a maneuver DC is the resistance you have to get over if you're trying to use your basic maneuvers to do these things to them. And so it's just built into the monster. Of course, massive monsters are going to be extremely difficult to knock over, or trip and fall, or maybe an experienced adversary is good with weapons. It's going to be very difficult to disarm them, as an example. All right, so here we have, oh, shoot. I apologize. There we go. So Moving down in the stat block, you can see we have all of the damage immunities and resistances, some of the senses, passive perception, always known that, or of fear. Let's move up to its actions. I'm sorry about this because this is a little bit new to me. In this section, and we've seen this most recently coming from WotC's reveal of how they're going to redo their own stat blocks for their monsters, but for level up, all of the creature's basic actions are going to be listed under actions. So these will be the most common combat actions it will take with its abilities. So you're going to see spells listed in here. Um, for level up, the spells have not been separated into a specific separated action. They are just going to be listed under a spell. So if they have fireball, it's going to say actions and it'll just say fireball as a spell, or sacred flame or something of that nature. So this is where all the common actions it will take. Whether it's life, for example, for this wraith, it'll be life drain and create a specter. Now, here we have the combat section. And the combat section is basically an example of what most commonly will this monster do. When in doubt, the narrator can look at this, look at the combat section, and go, well, would the monster gang up on one downed player? Will the monster run away? Will the monster use some kind of a deception or something like that? And in this case, like for example, under the combat section for the Wraith, it says the Wraith strikes the weakest looking or most isolated target, phasing through a solid object to attack if possible. So this means, on one hand, the monster is trying to gain the upper hand. So if the players are going through a deep, dark forest and one of the players is maybe scouting ahead, or maybe there's a player lagging behind, or what have you, is it quote unquote unfair to target the isolated character? Of course, but that's what this monster will do. And so if the players feel like they're either being picked on, or the monster is using tactics that seem a bit unfair, the players can and the narrator can refer back to this monster and go, yes, specifically, this monster is trying to take you out one by one, or this monster is ganging up on you, or whatnot. And so it's just an example. As further on, it says it stays close to its target in order to inflict fear on it, thus gaining the most from its life drain. Once the creature is no longer frightened by it, it flies away, taking opportunity attacks if necessary, and tries to frighten and drain another target. If it flees if it takes force, radiant, or psychic damage while bloodied. And again, this goes back to the bloodied circumstance that, oh wow, if it's at half its hit points and it starts taking like force, radiant, or psychic damage, it's like I'm out of here, because it knows this monster will know. Oh, I gotta go. I got a GTFO, really. And then of course we have the Wraith Lord, and the Wraith Lord has been around, but many of the monsters have variants. And I love the fact that there's even variants for the majority of the monsters in the book. And of course, it goes into their specific attacks and actions and things like that. So, getting back to the end of this, I just want to say that with the monsters and some of these other sneak peeks, um, this is editorial. They didn't ask me to do this, but I am one of the contributing writers. I participated in the exploration pillar portion of the design, but the rest of this, I just wanted to give those of you who really, really wanted to take a look at, and you're on the fence. You're really on the fence about whether you want to support this Kickstarter, or maybe in the future, this is something that you want to invest in. I'm hoping this is helpful to you, and hopefully it changes your mind. Or if it doesn't change your mind, it gives you something to talk about. So, again, thank you so much. Uh, I see someone, despite the fact that I went live, I see that that Rickard's like, pre-recorder, are you really up at 6 a.m. on Saturday? Yes, I'm really up at 6 a.m. on Saturday. Yeah. Normally I go live and invite people, but this is a little bit of a I don't know. a verbal component, just a little tiny snippet. So I'll be doing them. I'm trying to insert them like on Saturdays, Sundays, and of course, I stopped going live on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I said, well, this is a good opportunity to add a little bit more content to the channel. So, anyway, guys, thank you so much for being part of this. I intended this to only be like 5 minutes, but I get excited. So, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much, all of you creatives, community, and kind folks out there. I wish you peace and love for your Saturday. Thank you so much. Have a great one. I will see thee